You're listening to Keys for Farewell. This is where one great question sparks a whole new conversation. I'm your host, Caitlin Green Johnson. I'm an apprentice funeral director and apprentice embalmer here at Anderson Funeral Home under the direction of our owner, Damon Hobbs. The question for today is this: are we in the midst of an American attitude adjustment when it comes to living and dying? I think so. It's no secret that our attitude can either help us or work against us, especially when it comes to thanatology or our attitudes about death. Our American death narrative makes a great deal of difference in everything we do, especially the decisions that we make or avoid. I see it everywhere. I see it in American culture. You can see it on TV. You can hear it on the radio. You can see it in communities and even in people's behavior. I came to this work through aging, psychology, and in the last 15 years or so, I've noticed that as a gerontologist and a doula, I've learned that many families will not say the words hospice, death, dying, anything close to it. Why is that? Many of them will even tell me, don't say that. Don't use the word hospice. Don't tell mom she's on hospice. Don't say death. Don't say funeral. Don't say anything about it. And it's ironic that usually the one who's going through it, the person who is dying, knows exactly what's happening, and they can use those words freely. So why do we do that? Why do we try to save ourselves or our loved ones from facing the music with the hard words? I love history. So I really like looking over time how things change. And I see a big change as American history started to shift. Our ancestors, our forefathers, they were born, they worked, they lived, and they died on the homeland, maybe on the farm, generational land. They may have lived in the same house as their parents and their grandparents, maybe aunts, uncles, and cousins. Neighbors were family and neighbors were friends. At that time, the dead were laid out at home. We presented people in the home parlor. In the South, we called it the parlor, right? It was often this room specifically used for that purpose. We had rules about it. We dressed a certain way. We talked a certain way. There were even cards and ribbons and a lot of the Victorian mourning rituals that came. Then we started to migrate to a funeral parlor somewhere other than the home. When that happened, we started calling the room at home the living room. I think that's ironic. Then after that, funeral parlors turned into funeral homes, and we began to segment death, kind of this out of sight, out of mind. Of all the human experiences, none is more overwhelming than death. I get that. The key is the implications we put with it. It's not actually death that overwhelms people. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of maybe aging or loss of independence, being disabled, maybe. And it is traumatic. Think about the first death you experienced. Do you think that formed your perspective? Sure. Did that inform your behavior? Sure. Most funeral directors choose this career because they either had a terrible experience and they vowed to make a difference, or they had a really good experience and they wanted to serve their community in the same way. Think about you. If your first experience was traumatic, do you avoid the funeral home like the plague? What about a hospital? What about a nursing home? In this country, Americans tend to relegate death to the peripheral. Some people think out of sight, out of mind. Others say, I'll deal with it when it comes. But death doesn't happen at some distant intersection. How old were you when you first experienced your first death? How old were you the first time you remember being at a funeral home, or maybe someone had died? It's fairly likely that you were pretty young. That means that death and life run parallel. We experience death and all of the things that come with it from the very beginning. I can make a pretty good case that Americans have a poor attitude because we've got all this taboo, we've got stigma, and then sometimes we even like the fantastic and maybe the spooky. Our lores and our stories create curiosity. You hear morbid curiosity. It is kind of wild to me that to try so hard to avoid to say death and dying, we say it all the time. We use phrases like dead center, the dead heat of summer, I'm dead tired, traffic is deadlocked, dead ahead. We say dead an awful lot for people who avoid talking about death. And then, of course, in the South, we're known for some of my phrases, and they're hilarious. But it's almost like this analogy we use to skirt the hurt. How many of these did you grow up with? Kick the bucket, gone, expired, succumbed, left us, we lost her, checked out, laid to rest, pushing up daisies. I do love that one. I'm your huckleberry. Called home, goner, bit the dust, gave up the ghost, snuffed out, no longer with us, dirt nap, the great beyond, gone to the other side, asleep in Jesus, departed, bought the farm. You don't hear that one much anymore. With the angels, crossed over Jordan, perished, joined the ancestors. There's so many more. I love a lot of the videos on social media where we talk about different people from different places say different things. There's one that I follow about Appalachia and the words that they use. And it's not much different here in Tennessee. I've heard all of these growing up. What are we actually saying? Death is more than just a physical thing. It's more than just a spiritual thing. It's more than just a mental thing. It's all the above wrapped up in a scary gift basket. This has to do with human existence. You hear the word tossed around a lot, existential. But existential is really what we believe as human beings about our place in this life and in the next. And really, it's no wonder that our attitude has gotten off track. And now it's affecting our life and death decisions. How is it that so many people cannot cope with being in a hospital, a nursing home, or a funeral home, but they can play video games that show violence or mass killings? They can binge watch true crime. Or some people love horror, haunted houses, scary movies, some of the fantastical. Most people love ghosts. How many of them cannot go into a funeral home because of their anxiety or they avoid it? That's our American culture. It's been said that one of the most important and unique aspects of being human is this awareness of our own mortality. Now, you might guess what I'm about to say, but I promise I'm not going to say that. I do not tell people you need to figure out your own mortality in order to help others understand theirs. There is really no figuring it out, right? To me, that's kind of a byline that we use in healthcare when we don't know what else to say. The truth is that no two stories are the same. It is far more complex than that. Instead, we should start saying, listen, you cannot ignore death. Societies have traditionally taken tremendous care with the shared transformation of life into death because death is disruptive. There is a quote, and it's actually from a historical figure about politics. And he said, "Show me how a country cares for their dead, and I'll tell you what their core values are." It's really true. In thanatology, or the study of death, dying, and those that experience it, there's a lot of philosophy and ethics. Those things shape our values. And then our values shape the concepts of how we act. I love psychology. enjoy reading psychology. I teach psychology, but I love to know what makes people tick. This mental and emotional effect of loss and how people cope when death presents. In this week in class, my students and I are studying how different methods of death affect the grieving process. For example, somebody that is murdered, that is a totally different process than somebody that dies in their sleep. That's really psychology, and then it blends into sociology. Sociology is like a ripple effect. How does your family, your group, your religion, your culture, your tribe deal with death and dying? What about children? What are you teaching them? What about older people? How do they respond when someone dies? It's much different. Age does make wisdom, or perhaps experience. The manner in which we respond to death really depends on how we are embedded. Think about the culture in which you grew up. That affects your behavior now. Just like the willingness to engage in risky behavior is a teenage thing, right? We're daredevils. We're adrenaline seekers. We get a little bit older, we are more likely to take out insurance, start maybe being more responsible with our money and our risks. But then there comes a point where we develop an attitude toward things like organ donation, maybe the death penalty, euthanasia, or maybe even the belief in the afterlife. So, in many ways, this culture helps us formulate our perceptions, but it can also help us deny or disguise death. Isn't that true? The whole church said amen. I really believe that counselors, social workers, doctors, nurses, nursing home administrators, heck, even daycare administrators need to understand these conventions of thanatology because death touches every age. How many school-age children have grandparents die? How many school-age children in this world see other school-age children die? We know that it's reality. I'd even say that everybody knows that they're going to die or they're going to face it. But do we really believe it? Hope is not lost. I keep a positive attitude because Americans, perhaps like never before, are getting back to human connection. I've heard it say our grassroots. We're getting back to the simpler side of things that really matter. I love seeing the new generations playing instruments, growing gardens, canning vegetables, teaching their children these values. Many parts of our country have even returned to our ancient ways of natural caregiving and death care. Just like anything else, life and death, it's what we make it. And our attitude is everything. Thanks so much for being here today. Be sure to tune in next time to Keys to Farewell. Anderson Funeral Home is Gallatin's family-owned and operated funeral service. We're located here in Gallatin, just off the square, and we're humbled by the opportunity to serve your family.